And so seeing how the resistance has been conducting itself in the most human way possible and juxtaposing it to a nonstop Holocaust broadcasted on television and on social media, demolished this 100-year, multi-trillion-dollar propaganda machine that was invested. Okay? And right now, it's practically, there's no one on this planet that believes this propaganda anymore. That wouldn't have happened if the resistance from day one conducted themselves the same way the butchers, the Zionists, the white supremacists, the imperialists have conducted themselves in this war. Okay, so now we have demolished that. We are right now in a different stage. Now with the assassination of martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, I believe we will be seeing a new form of warfare. Those things that, those limits that the resistance has put on themselves in order to show the example, the opposite example of Zionism and imperialism, are unnecessary anymore, because there is nobody on this planet that will shed one tear if all of the Israelis are massacred tomorrow. I think the streets of Paris will burn in the next few days, few weeks, if this war in Lebanon breaks out into a full scale. There will be lynchings in the streets of Paris. There will be riots and maybe even armed uprisings.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We're back with award-winning journalist Laith Marouf, who reports to us from Lebanon, the heart of all the horrible stuff that is happening right now. And I wanted to first start with something, Laith, that I saw online, and I really wanted your response to it, because I think it's a question a lot of us are struggling with. Since the violence expanded into Lebanon. So let me share something that I saw, and then I would like to hear your opinion on what this guy says. So this is Alexander McKay, some Marxist guy who said something very interesting about the resistance, and I wanted to hear Laith's reaction to this, because I think it's a question a lot of us are dealing with. So here we go, and please, and I'll stop it and then discuss with you what you think.
This struggle in West Asia is exposing the limits of how resistance has been conducted up to now. Faced with this amount of violence coming from the US imperialists, then it will necessitate another change. The way that resistance has been conducted up to now clearly isn't enough to uproot the US imperialists from the West Asia. They are capable of even greater and more enormous forms of violence, and will engage in them up to the point where they can't sustain themselves anymore.
So that's a very short clip, but it actually triggered a thought in me, and I think a lot of us are at the moment wrestling with that now. We are all extremely how can you say that, in awe, and we admire greatly the Arab resistance, who are the only ones you could actually say were fighting back against the Zionists. But we see that their moral forms of warfare, and sticking to the rules of engagement, only aiming at military targets, etc., is simply not having an effect on the Zionists. They simply don't care, and they carpet bomb complete societies to the Stone Age. So my question is, Laith, what do you think when you hear this man speak, and how do you see that yourself as somebody actually from West Asia?
Well, there's two things that we have to keep in mind when we think about these words. Number one is that this battle had two parts to it. The battle of liberation of Palestine. One is an ideological thought battle. And that required us as resistance here to demolish 100 years of propaganda, indoctrination in the Western societies and societies that they have dominated across this planet with this idea that Jews are chosen people, that the Holocaust is the worst atrocity in human history, that the suffering of Jews is above and beyond the suffering of all other humans, that Arabs and Muslims are barbaric, bloodthirsty, rapist, butcherers. Okay, this was ingrained in Western society and any societies that were under their domination for decades. I remember when I first moved to Canada in 1996, sorry, 1994, actually, I'm losing track time. I was a young man, and I was trying to date this Quebecois, French, English, half English, French woman, and trying to ask her out. And the first thing she said to me was, "You're not going to kidnap me, are you? I read Not Without My Daughters." I don't know if our listeners or viewers know this book from the 80s, but it is, and it was made into a movie in the 80s also, which portrays an Iranian man married to an American woman, and then he takes his daughters and runs away to Iran, and then the CIA does an operation and kidnaps the children back from Jordan and so forth. So this book, for instance, was being taught, and this is what I know, up until recently as required reading in the high schools in Canada. It's part of the list of books that you have to read in your last 2 years of high school, right? So this is what we had to, this propaganda, had to be demolished before we actually get into the physical military fight. And so seeing how the resistance has been conducting itself in the most human way possible and juxtaposing it to a nonstop Holocaust broadcasted on television and on social media, demolished this 100-year, multi-trillion-dollar propaganda machine that was invested. Okay? And right now, it's practically, there's no one on this planet that believes this propaganda anymore. That wouldn't have happened if the resistance from day one conducted themselves the same way the butchers, the Zionists, the white supremacists, the imperialists have conducted themselves in this war. Okay, so now we have demolished that. We are right now in a different stage. Now with the assassination of martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, I believe we will be seeing a new form of warfare. Those things that, those limits that the resistance has put on themselves in order to show the example, the opposite example of Zionism and imperialism, are unnecessary anymore, because there is nobody on this planet that will shed one tear if all of the Israelis are massacred tomorrow. Okay? And that would have not happened if the resistance conducted itself differently from day one. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, right. No, very, very good point. Exactly. I think you make such a good point. If they would have gone guns full blazing in the beginning, everybody would be like, oh yeah, you see those Arabs, of course. And what you're saying also really hits home about the girl you dated and who said then like, oh, you're not gonna kidnap me, right? I remember one day back in the day, in the Netherlands as well. I was dating this girl. I think I was maybe 19, 20. And I remember that she told me she was scared of Arabs and Muslims. And I was like, why? And she is like, because her mother always gave her books about Muslims and about how scary they were. And she was like a kid of 6, 7 years old. She said she read those books and they really made her scared of Muslims. And I'm like, which parent does that stuff to their child? It's really crazy, but that stuff is really happening, in the West. But anyway, to get back to this whole situation, Laith, I had another question. I saw in a program. It's called Five Pillars. These are Muslims in the UK, and they had the opinion. One of their reporters is in Lebanon, and they were of this opinion that actually the Zionists were successful in creating divisions in Lebanon, and that after the bombardments in Lebanon, there's also a lot of blame towards Hezbollah. To what extent do you think that is true, and how united are people in Lebanon?
Well, they're more united than any point in their history, I think, as a nation since 1942, and their fabrication as a nation and chopping off from Syria by the French forcefully. I can tell you for a fact that, just looking at even videos of the churches in Lebanon, the Maronite churches specifically, that the West has invested millions of dollars to control the thought of the Maronites here. People were weeping openly in the churches, in the Maronite churches. The Orthodox churches, of course, are all pro-independence, pro-Syrian unification. To see the Archbishop of the Maronite sect issuing a statement yesterday mourning the loss of what he called the martyr, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. That shows you that even though they may have been in the leadership of the Maronite sect, collaborators and agents of the West, that even this archbishop couldn't deny the feelings of his congregation. It would have been too much if he didn't make a statement of mourning. So, and then we look at the Sunnis, the other population that the Wahhabi and Ikhwani tools of the West have invested in to separate them from their Shia brothers and sisters. And just yesterday, one of the leaders of the Muslim Sunni kind of resistance groups was assassinated in the Beqa Valley. And the Sunni population in Lebanon have been watching as Hezbollah and the Shia people in Yemen, Iraq, and Iran, and Syria fight for saving the lives of the Sunnis in Gaza, the Sunnis in the West Bank. There's practically no Shia in Palestine. So it is impossible to deny our eyes. This is where, again, you see, like, if we go back to your first question, the way that the resistance has conducted itself in, number one, not being sectarian, number two, being human and humanist, and being proud of our martyrs and refusing to be victims, and all of these things have demolished everything that the West invested in for 100 years, including all of their local vessels, what they invested in, the manufacturing of the new Sunni or the new Muslim or the new Arab that the West tried to, for 100 years to make, has gone. It is impossible now to separate people, I think, in this way. Now, of course, the losses and damage that have been, done to Lebanon over the last week specifically are enormous. There's more martyred in 1 week in Lebanon than in the 2006 war. There's more destruction than the 33-day war of 2006. And there is purposeful targeting of Christian neighborhoods. For instance, yesterday, the attack on Sidon in English, targeted specifically a Christian neighborhood, hit a building full of Christian people that were martyred. The largest number of martyrs in other than the attack on Dahiya to assassinate Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And those people were out feeding the hungry and the displaced just before they went back home. So the internal solidarity in Lebanon, I think the patriotic feeling of even being what is Lebanese is actually stronger than it ever was before.
So you're telling me that all of these Twitter accounts I see claiming that Lebanese are so happy to be quote unquote liberated, and who is that? Jared Kushner quoted that walking stereotype of a French pseudo intellectual who's insufferable. I forget his name, Bernard Henry Levy or
Louis.
something.
Yeah, yes.
So this is from someone on the ground. This is a clear propaganda campaign to try to portray Lebanese society as internally divided, when in fact, from your experience, it's actually more united than any time in recent memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's two Zionist Jews quoting each other. Kushner and Levy are two Jewish white supremacists. And I think Levy, should be on a list to be dragged to a war crime tribunal, not only for what's happening here in Palestine, but also for what he did in Libya, what he did for the rest of the Arabic populations, what he's doing to the French citizens that are of Arab and Muslim background. This man is responsible for the death of tens of thousands of people and the justification of their death. No, there is, anyone that wants to take facts from a Jewish white supremacist, they're welcome to. I think it's actually better for us that more Zionists believe this stuff, because they're detached from reality, and therefore they are not able to actually make decisions that are effective. Look at the Zionists, how they're conducting their warfare here in Lebanon. Only a stupid, dumb person who has no strategic depth in understanding military or psychological or whatever warfare would do what they're doing. And the reason that they are taking these stupid decisions is because they are right now closed in on themselves. They have blocked reality completely. They live in an illusion. They want us all to live in that illusion. They keep on propagating, but most of the human beings that have not been indoctrinated since childhood, or don't have this tribal religious supremacist drive to stay within this tribe, have awakened because of the media that we're seeing coming out of from the field and the way that the Axis is conducting themselves. So right now they are living on a parallel plane of existence, these Zionists. And the more they are detached from reality, the more they will be making mistakes.
Right, right. And I think it's very good that you highlight often that these are Zionist white supremacists, because the whole idea that these things often are about religion and this and that. And I mean, you can see that the whole idea of white supremacy is more powerful than religion, because otherwise the Christians in the United States would support all the Christian victims of Zionists. They don't. They feel more affinity with Zionists. So there is something else going on than religion, and then I think that's pure racism, to be honest, in many aspects. So I wanted to ask you about something that also a lot of people are wondering right now, and I would like to have your assessment on this. I saw you just had a recent discussion with Professor Marandi. We've invited him a few times, but we cannot reach him, unfortunately. But great stuff. And I want to ask, to what extent do you agree or disagree with people who are saying that Iran is disappointing in its response at the moment, and the people who also say that, or the gossip, the news, that the new president actually struck a deal with the imperialists to not respond because he was promised a ceasefire? What is your opinion on this, Laith?
Well, number one, Iran has lived 40 somewhat years of siege, blockade, and sanctions because of its position on the liberation of Palestine. Millions of Iranians were slaughtered by Western chemical weapons and weapons given to Saddam Hussein because of the Islamic Revolution and breaking the alliance between the Shah of Iran that controlled that country and the Zionist colony. Those were the two policemen of the West in the region. And the United States and the UK suffered a huge loss with the Islamic Revolution, not only control of the oil of Iran and the strategic political position of Iran, but also having a new enemy that is pro-resistance that they didn't count on the horizon. So anyone that wants to criticize Iran, they're welcome to, but they cannot deny that this nation, outside the Arabic people, the Iranian nation, are the ones that have sacrificed the most for the liberation of Palestine. Okay. So may God accept all their martyrs in His wisdom and in His heaven. The other thing is that, of course, the new president, he spoke yesterday saying that the West promised him, the French and the Americans promised him to have a ceasefire immediately after the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Bahrain, and that is why they, did not attack. Now, does that mean that they fell into a trap? They made a mistake. It's a new administration. The guy wasn't part of the official establishment in terms of intelligence and military before. That is very big possibility that, yes, we can count that as a mistake. But I would say one thing he probably would never say, Kazakhstan. And let's remember something. Sayyid Raisi, President Raisi, and the foreign affairs minister and all of the top cadres that were with him were assassinated by the Zionists. It wasn't an accident. It was an assassination. And Iran had to deal with an immediate issue of electing a new president and filling the huge gap left behind Raisi, who was very close to the Ayatollah and all of that. And let's also remember that the day of the inauguration of Kazakhstan, was the day of the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. So clearly the West assassinated President Raisi, martyred President Raisi, and then to warn the new coming president on his inauguration day, to show him that they can also kill him and his administration, they assassinated Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. So a new coming president, seeing that, the one before him was assassinated, his main guest is assassinated on his inauguration day, when he gets a phone call from the United States and France that same day, most probably he was also told, watch out. If you do respond right now, we will be killing you too. I'm saying this. I don't have any evidence to this, but I think it's easy to conclude from the events what has happened between them, between the lines. So yes, it must have been a big mistake. It must have been under a lot of duress and pressure. And I think right now, yesterday, we had a huge demonstration outside the government offices in Tehran. Tens of thousands of Iranians just in the middle of the night showing up in front of the government offices, and demonstrating against the president for falling into what they called this trap by the West. I think it came with a threat. It's not just a trap. So now that he has acknowledged, he will have to take action. Now we have a pressure on him to actually take action and be martyred, goddamn, if he is. And that's what will happen. We are going to be seeing right now a different, not only in how the axis of resistance is responding as a whole, but we are going to see a different Iran.
I have a media question for you, if you don't mind. The last time I read about media systems in West Asia was a long while ago, but from what I remember, in the Arabic language media, Lebanese companies dominate the space. Most news and culture programming is produced there, but then the companies are owned by Saudi investors generally. I don't know if that's still true or if it ever was. But my main question is, now that Lebanon is on the end of the scope, is in the crosshairs, has media coverage there and from there to much of the Arabic speaking world changed in any significant way?
After let's say before the 2000s, the majority of the Arabic media, other than national media outlets, there was not much, private media. And if there was a competition between Gulf states, Iraq and Libya being two countries that had a lot of money and oil that were competing with the Gulf over the private media sectors in the Arabic world. Now, those two other funders were slaughtered and their countries destroyed and their money looted and their oil looted. So the private media sector in the Arabic world immediately got dominated by Saudis, Emiratis, and Qataris. These are the three main funders of the media, the private media scape in the Arabic world. And that's like, we can, probably count 90% of all television and radio stations in the Arabic world. And so, of course, they have been, printing out and airing sectarian, anti-resistance propaganda for 20 some odd years, with the mediascape being totally open for them to dominate. This is above and beyond the Western media and global media that is broadcasting in Arabic to the Arabic world. Maybe our viewers, listeners don't know this, and maybe you don't know this, but according to studies and UN numbers, Arabic language is the most broadcasted language in the world. You'd think it's English, that there's more English channels on this planet, but no, it is Arabic. Why? Because not only we have 22 Arabic countries, each one of them with their private and public sectors, but also every state on this planet wants to affect the opinions of the Arabic people. And so the French, the Germans, the Russians, the Chinese, the Italians, everybody, the British, everybody's broadcasting in English to the Arabic world. And so Arabic is the most broadcasted language because of that, because everybody wants to control our minds. Finally, to answer directly your question about the Lebanese media here, some of the media, specifically media that pretended to be balanced, like let's say Al Jadid television, you see a small shift more towards support of the resistance, because they're scared of just pretending to be critical, okay? Because things are so clear, the genocide is in front of us, the country is being bombarded, you can't anymore stand on the fence. On the other hand, the ultra-fascist media like MTV, that is representing the Phalange, Christian supremacists, are finding themselves isolated even within their own population. In fact, some of their journalists that tried to walk into the Dahi, the southern suburb, to film almost got lynched in the street. Okay, this usually Hezbollah supporters and people in general that are anti-fascist, just ignore them. But now these fascist propagandists in the country are too scared of being out in the street to propagate anything. I think there is a shift in viewership. I mean, just looking at Al Mayadeen, their stream on YouTube, usually they have around 6,000 simultaneous viewers on their. We're talking about 30 to 60,000 now simultaneous viewers on their YouTube stream, other than their website, other than their satellite channel. So they have, are filling a huge gap in the Arabic world, and they're succeeding.
So you would say that the information, the messages, the arguments that people are getting in the Arabic language through the mass media have been changing over the past couple of weeks I don't know if it's as a result of the bombardment of Lebanon, but would you say it's like an improvement in the kind of coverage that your average mass media user would get?
No. Al Jazeera is still as racist and sectarian as possible. All these Saudi channels like Al Arabiya and others these are like the pan-Arab stations, let's say, not the local stations. They are all getting nastier and nastier, but they are losing a huge amount of viewership, right? Because Al Jazeera was broadcasting everything from the West Bank and Gaza and claiming to be pro-Palestinian. The minute the attacks started happening on Lebanon, they shifted into racist, anti-Shia, anti-Iran immediately. And that dichotomy, I think, shook even those who returned to watch Al Jazeera because of its coverage on the ground in Gaza. Remember, Al Jazeera had something like 500 million viewers prior to the Arab Autumn, before they triggered the slaughter fields, killing fields in Iraq and Syria and Libya on behalf of the West. And then by the end of the Arab Autumn, they only had around 5 to 6 million viewers. So they lost 90% of their viewership. And then they recaptured some of this viewership since the beginning of the Holocaust in Gaza, because they had the most journalists on the ground. Even Al Mayadeen has just a few journalists on the ground and doesn't have a huge office. They had a huge office all across Palestine, and they were able to give more on the ground coverage from what's happening in Palestine than even Al Mayadeen. Therefore, even pro resistance people were having to flip to watch Al Jazeera on this issue. But now, because of their imperialist, sectarian, racist coverage of what's happening in Lebanon, there's a mass exodus again away from Al Jazeera back to Al Mayadeen, and we can see that even in these numbers on the YouTube stream.
Right, and I think we really I've been discussing this often. I've also been writing about this on my Substack, and I've discussing this with Peter a lot as well. I think one of the major counter battles we have against imperialism is the psychological control through the media, and it's I think it's the number one battle almost. I don't want to make too big of a claim, but it's so important because, for example, I live in Asia. You go to your average coffee shop and you see CNN on, and I'm like, this latent indoctrination is so incredibly powerful. Why does the global South not get rid of it? You know what I mean? It frustrates me beyond belief. It's so powerful. Well, how do you see that going forward, Laith? What can we do about this? This seems to be so incredibly difficult to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I remember President Putin being asked about the propaganda war, and he said it's a fool's errand, to try to fight this war with the biggest propaganda machine. It is cost prohibitive. So I think what all of the other parts of the rising multipolar world have dedicated themselves right now to do is to speak to their own people. And that's a huge change, to try to have, and the other thing is that I think we need to move towards, but this is going to be a big change, is that BRICS countries should stop teaching English in schools. We should stop teaching French, Spanish. Should only be teaching our children in schools languages from our neighbors. Like in the Arabic countries, they should be teaching Persian, Turkish, Ethiopian, to their children in the schools, and or Mandarin and Russian. Okay, the main problem is that currently the global lingua franca is English, and we're having to communicate through this medium, which means that we are within the playing field of our enemy. Okay, now if there's less people, less children knowing English, they will not be subject to this propaganda, period. I am, whether I like it or not, I am an English person, because there's no such thing as race or ethnicity. I have grew up in an English environment. I have consumed English media. I consume English culture. And here, English, I don't mean England. I mean English-speaking culture. Therefore, I am an English person. I'm also an Arabic person because I swim in Arabic culture. I consume it. I speak it. I read it. Okay. Now, if I didn't speak English, clearly I'll be less affected by its propaganda or its mindset. How do I psychologically structure my words? Does the verb come before the subject? The subject, all of this is important. So no, the step number one is stop the next generation from being engulfed in this English language.
Yeah, and I think there's something else also that's very important, and I always say that to my Chinese students here. I always say that China should really stop sending their brightest to Ivy League schools, because they all come back indoctrinated with the idea that free market capitalism is the way to go. It's ridiculous. And also the curricula in universities around the world, there's so much good literature from scholars from the global south. It's so good stuff. You really do not need to have all these mainstream propaganda books from the United States, because really it's very bad. And the amount of Chinese students I've had in my class just telling me they came from, let's say, Columbia University, and they're doing their masters at our university, and then they're saying like most books or most professors they had celebrated neoliberalism and capitalism. And I'm like, this is such a powerful way of getting the new generation indoctrinated, going back to their countries and becoming stooges of empire, because these smart ones are the ones who get into power eventually. You know what I mean? So it's a very smart system, and we really need to do something about that.
Luckily for us, the Western elite are so stupid, they're ending this flow of students from the South and the East. You know, in Canada, they're like chasing Chinese and Arabic students, and they want to cut their visas. Same thing in the US. So hopefully they will destroy their own tool of mind control over the rising new youth elite.
Absolutely. I wanted to shift gears a bit to one final question. I don't know if you wanted to jump in, Peter. You seemed like you wanted to say something.
Well, there's the issue of the new international economic order. There's like a 50th anniversary of the concept. It got buried in the 1980s, but that's kind of a bigger question. Since we have limited time, maybe you go first, and if we have time at the end, I'll jump in with that.
I'm ready to answer your questions. No hurry.
Okay, great. So then I'll ask one. Maybe yours is better, because mine is a bit always a bit pessimistic and more in the realm of darkness. But Laith, I always very much appreciate your directness, and you lay it out like it is. It's very simple, and often you say things that we all think, but many people are afraid to say. And there's one thing that you said a couple of times, and I feel that there's a big truth to it. My question is, so you've many times regularly said that people in the West, okay, so we're shifting now a bit to the West, that people in the West, especially Arabic people, Muslim people, need to really start taking care of themselves, protect themselves, be vigilant, because things will get worse, you always say. And eventually there may be a day that there will be prison camps all over again for Muslims, just like you saw concentration camps before with groups classified as non-white. And it's a frightening prospect, but it's not something where I think, oh, you're overdoing it right now. I think everybody actually can believe this. When we see what the West is supporting, I think many people actually believe this, or start to believe that this is a possibility. So a broad question in that sense. It's a bit of a dark question, but when we hone in to the West, how do you see it developing from here? What is your assessment of where things are going?
You know, I may be able to sometimes see things that others don't, because of how I've lived in both societies in the East and the West. And I was involved in organizing and revolutionary work, and both there and here. And I've, entered the highest circles of power even in Canada. This is part of why they hunted me down. And so I can see things that people can't see sometimes, that are just stuck in one part of the society. Even when we look at the axis of resistance leadership, And, I may be wrong, but I believe that they made a mistake in the beginning of this war, thinking that there is a way that the West will recognize that Israel is destroying its power, its name, its image, and that they would abandon it like they did abandon South Africa. And I was telling everybody that I could, have their ear that this will not happen. Because people, I think, in the axis of resistance didn't fully comprehend how all the Western identity right now is hinged on the existence of the Zionist colony. It's not only about power, control of trade, control of geopolitical position, control of oil, whatever. It is actually the core identity that keeps the manufactured white man together, is this idea that they are the inheritors of, the heritage of Moses and Jesus. Okay? And so they will fight till the last man for it. And so now I think the leadership of the axis of resistance has acknowledged that. We can see a shift that they know, and especially if you listen again to the last speech of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, it's clear in his mind that there is no stopping of this war, and there will be only either, there has to be a defeated and a victor. There's no ceasefire. Now, when we talk about the diaspora of the Arabic and Muslim community, again, it's because I lived there and I've seen, and I have lived with indigenous nations years at a time, have traveled all across the land, have seen the viciousness of treatment to our indigenous brothers and sisters and other minorities. Of course, the indigenous should never be called a minority, but I mean the minorities in those countries. I could see where this is going, given that this is going to be a full-out war that leads to is American and Western troops being brought back in coffins, given that we saw already millions of people out in the streets just to stop the genocide in Palestine. Imagine how many more millions will be out in the street as this war in Lebanon expands, as it becomes a regional war. Imagine the militancy of Arabic and Muslim communities, how much more it will get. I think the streets of Paris will burn in the next few days, few weeks, if this war in Lebanon breaks out into a full scale. There will be lynchings in the streets of Paris. There will be riots and maybe even armed uprisings, especially given that we see a whole section of the French citizenry that are not from Arabic or Muslim origin, that have been denied their democratic rights with the leftist party, what's his name, Michelon, or how do you say his name?
Mélenchon.
Mélenchon being refused the prime ministership. We just heard his words, saying that he stands with the patriotic resistance of Lebanon, using the same words, describing them like the French resistance to Nazis. These are very important things. This means that at one point, the French state, under the dictator Macron, will have to suppress directly with weapon, with force, their own population. When we're talking about 30% of the population voting for Mélenchon, this is not a joke. And therefore, the Arab and Muslim community should prepare themselves for the worst case scenario, like we are preparing ourselves right now here for the worst case scenario.
Well, that is as grim as Kareem suggested. The question I don't know even how to form it into a question. I was reminded of the new international economic order, this idea in the United Nations in the 1970s to have the global South countries of the world unite to form economic cartels for commodity exports, for high labor input production, all of these sorts of things to actually get development to the underdeveloped world. But the other side of it is if you have that unity on economic matters, then you have a political bloc that has real political power in the global sphere. A unity, an organization of the world's global South countries, in order to get a much fairer deal out of the global economic system, would also leave them in a position where they can leverage that power for political ends, like enforcing a ceasefire, ending the war. And I don't know how to put this into a question so much as I wanted to bring it up as something that is, I guess, hopeful in a sense if it actually materialized and we had that unity that we haven't had so far in the global South. But I think it came to mind when I was just thinking of these Israel boycotts, boycotting Israeli products, and I was just thinking, really you need to boycott U.S. products. Because it's the U.S. that is the far more powerful actor here, and moreover, the U.S. government is so enthralled to the Israeli government because you have a still small minority in the U.S. Now, not small in absolute terms. We're talking about tens of millions of evangelical Christians primarily, and right-wing Jewish Americans who are fully supportive of the Israeli government, but there's still a minority in the U.S. population. So if you have economic pressure being put on U.S. companies, then that creates the conditions for those companies to then pressure the government to do the opposite. But do you have, I guess, it's a terrible question, I'm putting it horribly, but do you have any thoughts about how greater economic and political unity among the world's majority countries might take shape so that, again, the world's majority can actually exert influence in politics?
Since the beginning of the BDS movement, I was in opposition to how focused on Israeli products and it is. I always thought that it should be a broad BDS against everything Western controlled. Japanese, Korean, European, North American, Australian, New Zealand, all of that should be boycotted. Everything from the Gulf countries should be boycotted. And as we see, the West, the empire with its arrogance and the Zionists are actually doing the work for us. Their cyber terrorism using, these civilian electronic devices as weapons, it is the best advertisement for total BDS against all of the empire and its components. And I don't need to pitch that anymore. I think there is a mass movement right now to get rid of anything Western. People are scared, even if I don't even have to convince people politically, ideologically. People are scared for their children, and they will dump these electronics without anybody prompting them to. And so the West is going to do our job for us with their arrogance. And as we see this is one of the last things on the international trade market that the West has an advantage over of China and others, is these luxury electronic and whatever products, iPhones, iMacs, blah, blah, blah. All of that is the only thing that the West still outsells others with, and is going to crash. So the European and American public will very soon start feeling the economic effects of this unannounced BDS that the whole of humanity is moving towards. And then you add on top of it the possibility of a regional war, which we're inching towards, which will happen, and the cut off of all trade routes to Europe and all oil and gas. And they will be crying in the streets. And then the Western public, no matter what, they're going to have to make a choice. Do they suffer and allow their elite to take them down to the drain, or do they rise up and not only to stop the genocide of our people here, but to stop their own suffering? And so I hope, actually, that the next coming days will be as painful as possible to Western societies. And, you know, I have a lot of friends in the West, and I wish them the best. But it seems like the only way that the Western societies will move to save themselves is if they feel unbearable pain.
Yeah, and even that seems to take a very long time, because Europe is already feeling a lot of pain since all these wars in West Asia and in Eastern Europe, especially Germany. I mean, Germany is just completely decapitating itself. It's really baffling. It's baffling. And also my country, the Netherlands. I mean, I talk to people, like the way the prices have risen in supermarkets, and it's just unbelievable. You know, and people still cannot connect the dots. You know, it takes a long time for people to actually connect the dots. Like, why is that? What's going on? You know, and that's the problem. I wanted to add that to you, to what you just said, Leith. You said, okay, the last aspect, that there is still dominance of the West is in the electronics, in these luxury electronics. And I would add to that, actually, also, of course, the digital part. The West has such a tremendous dominance on the web, on the digital sphere. It doesn't matter where you go, whether you go to Twitter, Facebook, Meta, even YouTube, even TikTok. Algorithms are still making sure that the most stuff that gets fed to people's psychology is pro-Western, and of course, it has shown to be a gateway into showing the other side of the story, but. I still think that also this hegemony with total algorithmic control and marginalization of counter narratives is something we also need to find something against very, very quickly. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. You're right.
All right. I don't know, Peter, I guess we can end it here.
Yeah, perfect. Actually, the timing is right on point.
Okay, great. So that was a great, Leith. We are definitely gonna hit you up again soon.
Thank you.
So make sure to stay safe, please. And,
yes, will do.
Really take care. Be careful and get out of there when things get too heated up, I would say. And inshallah. And thank you for this, and see you soon.
Thank you, Laith.
See you soon, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.